Hi, welcome to our podcast, Conservation Conversations. I'm Moe Qureshi, the Director of Climate Research and Policy at the Conservation Council of New Brunswick, and today we're going to be talking about greenwashing and misinformation in this two-part episode. With me today, we have our in-house expert, Danielle. Danielle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Smith. I am the Director of Climate Engagement and Campaigns at the Conservation Council.
Let's just jump right into it. So Danielle, topic today is greenwashing. What is greenwashing?
So this is a topic that I care a lot about. Essentially what greenwashing is, it's a marketing tactic that companies and industries use in order to gain good PR and show that they have environmentally friendly values, whether that be true or not.
Right, and some people think that greenwashing is kind of a recent phenomenon, when really we've seen this for quite some time. Can you tell us a bit about the history of greenwashing?
Sure. So essentially what has happened is that greenwashing has really come into mainstream as of late. There was a study that showed that in 2020, during or just after the pandemic, Google searches on how to live a more sustainable life had increased by like 4,550%, which really shows the want for people to live a more sustainable life moving forward. The difficulty is that greenwashing has been in place for quite a long time. Unsurprisingly, it sort of came about in the 1960s when we saw that big rise of environmental activism around books like Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. For example, in 1969, CorpWatch, a website, did some research and it showed that public utilities, they spent over $400 million on marketing to show that they were environmentally friendly, which was 8 times more than what they spent on research in order to become environmentally friendly.
Right, so spending way more on advertising how responsible they are instead of actually being responsible.
Yeah, so essentially what these companies, organizations, industries are doing is that they're deciding to show you one thing while keeping another part of their production line, the life cycle of their product, hidden from you. So they really celebrate the success of the things that they're doing that are environmentally friendly while not really publicly showing some of the ecological degradation that they may be causing in their life cycle of their product or whatever it is that they're producing. Well,
we kind of seen greenwashing since the 60s, but it seems like the term greenwashing was coined in 1986.
89, actually.
In 1989, okay. So even though it's been around for quite some time, we've defined it in the late 80s, and now we're kind of seeing it everywhere that we go. Every time we go into the grocery store or we're trying to buy some detergent, Tide went from red to green. So tell us a bit about that shift towards greenwashing every product.
Right, so it really comes down to what a company exists for. So most companies, they have shareholders that company is beholden to make money. So the way that our system works right now with capitalism is that you need to grow and grow and grow. So the whole concept of capitalism is to grow infinitely. The problem arises that once you've grown to a certain level, your production is going to exceed the planetary boundaries of what we have. Like, we know that Earth only has a finite amount of resources, and then if you keep exponentially growing, then the world's not going to have those resources. And with the Industrial Revolution, we've been seeing a lot of efficiency in our production processes, which make it easier to produce or make the same thing. Like, think fast fashion, for example. Some companies will have thousands of options of dress for one company, just dresses. They'll have 1,000 options during one season. Do we really need to have that many options? That's just an excess production, right? And then the problem is that they'll produce a small line, for example, that is environmentally friendly, and they tout that bit and don't tell you what the other line is doing. We see this locally with the billboards that we see along the highway. We see J.D. Irving producing billboards saying that they plant this many trees, that they're climate heroes, but then they have another company within that parent company that's Irving Oil, which is essentially extracting oil, which then produces CO2 emissions. So it's that hidden bit of information that oftentimes is left out of the marketing story that we're told.
So I think that's a good point you highlighted on in terms of greenwashing, where companies are so ready to advertise the good things that they've done and the successes or some of the environmental projects they do, but they don't highlight on the other half of the business that causes a lot of the issues.
Right.
So and when you brought up actually our planetary boundaries, it reminds me of World Overshoot Day, right? So I think it occurred, I forget exactly what day, but in May or sometimes of this year. So already we've consumed more resources than the earth can produce. So
the thing that makes where greenwashing plays into this is that these values make the consumer feel good about buying the product, so then they buy more. So it kind of plays into that consumerism part of it, right? So that's sort of how greenwashing plays a role in that cycle.
Gotcha. I wanted to ask you, like, what exactly is the role of industry? Should they be held accountable for some of these claims that they've been making?
Absolutely. I think the most accountability should lie with the industry or the company or the producer, whoever it is that's responsible for the production of the product or this resource. They are the ones that should be held the most responsible. And we're starting to see this kind of pop up with end user responsibility. But the thing is that they are not going to make that change if it makes them less money.
Right.
So we need another mechanism, which you might be more familiar with on the government side. So in my opinion, we need that government mechanism. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing some recent changes in Bill C-59, where they're kind of changing the Competition Act to allow us to verify some of these greenwashing claims. And enforce them. That's the key part. Before, I'm surprised it came this long to start doing this, because it never seemed right that you could falsely advertise or greenwash your products to trick consumers into thinking you're doing the right thing. And I'm finally happy to see some steps being taken with Bill C-59, and I'll be curious to see how far it actually goes, but that enforcement in verifying those claims I think is key. But the crux of the issue is that in the end, we're kind of asking industry to verify if their own products are sustainable, when really we kind of need that third-party accreditations. And I think you know a bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a consumer, we're inundated with this marketing tactic, whether we're aware of it or not. You kind of see this as, so for example, if you think about detergent aisle, shampoo aisle, you just see a swath of green. And a lot of times we will just connect the color green with environmentally friendly. So at a baseline, that's the simplest type of greenwashing. But then the next step is sort of labeling. So sometimes you'll see a little leaf on the product, but no sort of name of what that leaf means. Right. So it looks like it's an eco label, but in fact it's not. It's just designed with a leaf on it. But then you do have eco labels at the bottom. So when looking at eco labels, thinking about third-party accreditation is good. Even with industry as well, we have things like FSC certification for paper production. We have certain standards for institutions like STARS. So there are certain standards, but the key part is you want to look to see if they're third-party certified. And what that means is that the product or the company needs to have it audited to show that what they're reporting is in fact true. So that's that checks and balances piece. So that third-party accreditation is important. But let's think about it from the consumer's perspective, right? Because you're not going to know which label is third party and what is not. So what do you do? So what I would suggest, because I know that can be really difficult and confusing, is to, let's go back to that detergent wall that you're in front of. You want to find something that's environmentally friendly. First, and you see some labels. If you have the time, pull out your trusty phone. We always have them with us all the time, right? It's kind of
it's true.
Problematic. But you can they're helpful. You can use something like Google Lens or take a photo of it and do a reverse Google search. And what that will do is it'll show if that it'll take you likely to that Eco Labels website. And with a quick search, you can try to find out if they're third-party accredited. If that shows up, that's probably your easiest and fastest choice. Pick that one. If I mean, there's other things too to consider, like if it comes in a plastic bottle, those are other things to consider, but if we're just talking about greenwashing, this is a pretty simple solution. Then if you don't have time in the supermarket, like who has time? You have kids running around you, you have to get home and make supper, like we're all strapped for time. Just buy the bottle you think looks good, like look at the accreditation, like see the eco label, take that with a grain of salt, buy the product, take it home, then do your search after that. And one of the really cool sites that I like to look on is ecolabel.com, and it will sort of list the different types of eco labels and will take you to the websites that will help you kind of determine if they are third-party verified.
Very cool. But it seems like a lot of the onus is on consumers, right? Is that appropriate? Like, is it the consumer responsibility to deal with this?
Yeah, absolutely not. This is one of the things that really frustrates me, and I think frustrates a lot of people, is that all of the onus is put on the individual, and we're up against a large marketing tactic. So and we don't have a lot of time, and maybe we're not really educated in this. So then it takes more of our time to become more educated, and then it's just not, it really shouldn't be. It's unfair that all of the onus is put on the consumer, where it really should be on the producer. We should be able to trust what companies are saying to us, and I think that's, like you said, where government comes in. So
Right.
I think there needs to be a better system than what we're in now.
So if I could break it down, it's more like we should have stronger standards
Yes.
implemented by government.
Yes.
And government is also the enforcer to make sure that companies are following these standards.
Yes.
But companies and industry themselves, they should be trying to be as sustainable as possible and report on everything that they're doing, that transparency, that third-party accreditation to make sure that they're following that. And at the end, when it comes to the consumer, it shouldn't be the consumer who has to decide if this is trustworthy and this is not trustworthy. They should be able to be comfortable shopping for products without having to worry about the effect that it has, right?
Absolutely. But the one thing I will point out, and this comes up a lot, is that these types of accreditations are really difficult for small business companies because they do end up costing quite a bit. So I think one of the key things that we need to consider with Bill 59 and with these accreditations is that they become more feasible for smaller companies to be able to do that. B Corporation is one of those ones that does have a lower price tag that is quite well known, that really focuses on people, planet, and profit, which is a very good sustainability model for a company. So even just kind of educating yourself a little bit on some of the major best practice third-party certifications is a good way to go, but also know that some companies, especially in third world or small business that are just starting, it's not within their reach to get these accreditations.
Right. I think the last point I want to touch on is that consumers have more power than they think, right? Like we're seeing the divestment movement at universities. We're seeing that, companies really care about product reviews. And a lot of people, most of their purchases tend to be word of mouth. So does the consumer have some power in shifting some of these practices?
Absolutely. I think one of the things, the best thing you can do with little effort is just, if you do have the information, share it with your friends, rave about the product that you really like, that you trust, kind of get that social capital within your community is really important. And if you share that information, it may impact somebody's choice down the line. If you want to take a little bit of an extra step, then write to your MLAs, write to your MPs, write to the companies and demand more transparency on these products.
That's a really good point, and I'll start thinking to do that, honestly. Thank you, Danielle. In the end, I wanted to know that now that we're having all this greenwashing on these products, what's the long-term effect of that?
Yeah, so the long-term effect of this is that the thing about greenwashing is that it makes you feel good to buy that product. Like, essentially, that's the emotion that this marketing tactic is kind of preying on, whether it's purposeful or not. The thing that we need to be aware of is that if you blindly trust this, or the company, or that social capital that company has really sort of developed, it can really lead into giving them a lot of power, and it can further lead to misinformation. One of the things I find difficult to kind of separate in my head sometimes is, like, what is the difference between greenwashing and misinformation, and I'm not sure there is a difference, but I think they work hand in hand. And I really want to kind of jump into misinformation with you, because that's sort of where where your expertise lies. So maybe we'll just take a break right now, and we'll kind of come back and really dive into misinformation.
For sure. We'll take a little breather, and then we'll talk misinformation.